An hour later, I was enjoying a peaceful tea time with Cass on the balcony of a tea house in the downtown area. Every woman passing by glanced at him, but my eyes were on the cake. "It's so sweet. Eat quickly, Marquis. At this rate, I'll eat all of this." As expected, it tastes much better than the cake I ate at the temple, whether it's the truth or not. I'm saying that the tea also tastes good. Cass spoke. "You must have been hungry." "No, I've eaten, though," I said as I poked the corner of the piece of cake with my fork. "Doesn't every saintess have a separate stomach for meals and dessert?" The sweet cake raised my mood to the highest level of tension. "It'll be a sin not to eat this." And I glanced at Cass, who was sitting still without eating. "Instead of 10%, I want to have a cup of tea with the saintess." Cass said, "You're enjoying that, huh? I had no idea dessert would put you in a good mood so quickly. I've never watched someone eat like this before." Seeing him just staring at me while I ate deliciously, I felt like a happy pig alone, so I picked up his fork. "You said it was a sin, Marquis." Then I took a piece of cake and gave it to him. "Or are you waiting for me to feed you? Did I eat too much?" However, it was enough to be formal in the temple, so I didn't want to pretend to be a lady until I came out to play in this free outfit. Cass looked at my red cheeks and asked, "Ah, is it rude to say that?" "Yes, it's very rude." I reached out and pushed the fork in his hand. The cake touched his lips. "Hurry up, eat this." He looked at me and smiled again and put the cake in his mouth. "It's delicious." His voice was heard. "It's delicious, right?" I asked. He replied, "Many times more than what I ate a few days ago." Did they even upgrade their toppings in just a few days? I tilted my head. Then the chat window opens. The god of knowledge, Hest, drools. The god of art, Mont, is looking for a cake recipe. That's right. Even the gods themselves are jealous of a dessert feast like this. He ate all the cake I had served, and asked me after a while. He then spoke. "I was wondering. Is there anything about me you'd like to know? It feels like I'm the only one who asks questions when we meet. Or, if there's nothing you're curious about, maybe something you'd like to talk about." Then again suddenly all the gods became curious and a chat window popped up. The god of benevolence, Oman, wonders what his bed tastes like. The god of destruction, Seal, moves his gaze to Cass's firm body. Perhaps the reason I sometimes have strange thoughts is because of these two gods. I told Cass, "Well, there isn't any." "No, it seems like there is." "Ah, there is." In an instant, a word came to mind. He raised his eyebrows as if he was asking a question, and I opened my mouth. "Well, I am paying for today." I told him. I made up my mind about it the moment we walked into this shop. It should be my treat. After all, the only reason I made this money is because of you. Cass looked at me for a while at my words and then turned his head to the side. There was a smile on his lips. He looked like he was holding back his laughter, and after a while, he looked at me and nodded his head. He spoke. "I should know better than to get my hopes up around you." "Oh, were you hoping I'd say something more like?" Looking into his eyes, I said over and over again, "Next time, I'll buy you a more expensive one." Then he smirked and covered his mouth. Was Cass a character who smiled so well from the beginning, or was he a sociopath in the original story? He looked at me happily, as if I was a smile button. No matter what happens in the future, it's not bad to maintain a good relationship with the male leads as it will reduce the risk to me as well. "I have something to order." "You seem to have eaten a lot now. Will you have another one?" he inquired. I answered Cass' words. "No, I'm going to bring it to Daisy. I know she says she's fine, but I think a delicious treat might cheer her up a bit more," I said with a wide smile. Cass looked at me silently for a long time, and he licked his lips as if he wanted to be heard. "As expected, I'm jealous too," he said. "Pardon," concentrating on eating the cake. I didn't understand well, so I asked the question with a puzzled look, but he didn't answer again. I asked, "What is it?" He replied, Oh, it's just, the cake is so delicious, I hate the thought of sharing it with someone. Then the scene shifts to the imperial palace. When the glass vase fell to the floor, it shattered and scattered. Alberto was avoiding his gaze with a firm expression, and Rose's lips, standing with her back to the window, were trembling. Rose's eyes full of poison were filled with criticism and fixed on Alberto. She shouts, "How the hell are you doing your job?" Alberto turned his eyes and opened his mouth. Obviously, a girl named Annie said she was a stupid fake saintess. She replied, "Think that red fox is stupid." Rose's eyes were brimming with life. What nonsense. She knew for sure that the kid from Chiago was fake. Then, Alberto said after a moment, his eyes wide open, as if he had remembered something. He then spoke, "You're right. I think she used that maid on purpose to get us into her trap." Alberto grinded his teeth, recalling the humiliating memory of being slapped on the cheek by the saintess. Trap. At Rose's question, Alberto nodded his head. He said, "That's right. Isn't she close with Prince Kyle?" Alberto's fist slammed the table and spoke. "It was clear from the beginning that the two of them were working together and were trying to deceive me." "You fell for it." Rose's angry voice criticized Alberto. He spoke, "Perhaps the saintess has some kind of relationship with Prince Kyle. Before this, when I installed explosives on the statue to ruin his birthday banquet, didn't she cover the crown prince with blatant lies? After getting rid of Annie, she showed her true colors. The Empress opened her mouth and told him that, the Emperor was also angry with me. He didn't even look for me this morning." She was furious as she put her hand on her slender belly that hadn't come out. Ever since her pregnancy was announced, every morning the Emperor put his hand on her stomach and went out reciting her favorite verses and songs. But today, even the Emperor's shadow didn't enter this room. "Your Imperial Majesty the Empress." Alberto walked over to her, avoiding the broken glass. And he looked into the eyes that resembled his and said with scorching eyes, "There won't be two failures." "How dare you?" Rosé stared at him coldly. He spoke, "She's the saintess, but after all a human's body is weak." At Alberto's words, Rosé furrowed her eyebrows. He continues, "How about inviting the saintess to the Imperial Hunting Festival in 10 days? She spoke, "The Imperial Hunting Festival. Will the saintess come? To cure the monsters that are hunted?" Ha! Rosé frowned as if it wasn't worth hearing. But Alberto continued. "The Imperial Hunting Festival originated from Hetus, the god of justice, and it's a festival that began with the blessing of the Temple of Elysium from generation to generation. It's nothing the saintess can't participate in. I will create public opinion in nobility society. They're going to complain that she has neglected her duties as a saintess until now. So that Elysium has no choice but to be concerned. Even so, the man who was sent to kill the saints' right hand couldn't even do that and returned in a wreck, then was secretly disposed of. This time, we'll have to plan for sure." Rosé's eyes gleamed coldly. She said, "This time you should not fail." He said, "Please trust me, sister." Scene shifts to temple. Ariel is sitting in the garden. Then Daisy came. She called her name. I replaced the smashed bed. The remark brought a sudden flush of anger. I cried out in a hoarse voice, "Do you have to put it that way?" "Pardon," she replied. "It's smashed. Do you really have to say that? My face has been burning since morning." Daisy added fuel to my shame with her blunt words. This was all because of CL's blessing. The chat window popped up. "The god of benevolence, Oman, loves your passion. The god of destruction, Seal, blushes as he recalls the broken bed. I had a dream last night. I was walking through the forest on horseback, and all of a sudden, bad guys in black appeared and pointed their swords at me. I blocked the sword with my hand, and as soon as it touched my hand, it shattered with the mighty blessing of destruction. Then I beat them up with my bare hands. Well, they passed out just after I touched them with my hands, so it doesn't matter, but I guess what happened with Daisy was more traumatic than I thought." I ask from Daisy, "Daisy, are you really all right? If you still want to rest, it's..." Daisy reply, I am perfectly alright. But I've really gotten better. The saintess healed me. You also bought me a delicious strawberry mousse cake yesterday. I replied, I'm glad you liked it. It's good to see her full of energy. I was discovered to have had holy powers, and now I'm treated like a real saintess. The plan of escaping and becoming independent before Camilla appeared was based on the premise that I was a fake saintess who was indifferent to men. Because if a fake saintess vacates the temple, Rayhousty won't search the country for me like a mouse. But now that I'm the only saintess in the Empire, he will probably send all the paladins to find me. The attitude of the believers have done a complete 180. Dwayne even came to me and asked me to pardon him for his doubts. Receiving these excessive glances made me feel burdened inside. The chat window popped up again and the god of love, Odyssey, raises his chin and raises the corners of his lips. The god of art, Mond, is dissatisfied with the number of jewels in your costume. The god of destruction, Seal, blushes his cheeks red. These awful attention seekers were rejoicing with pride at the attention I received. Suddenly a voice came. Your Holiness, it was Daisy. I heard from Sir Dwayne that my attacker still hasn't been caught. I'm worried you might be in danger because of me. I opened my mouth and spoke. Daisy, whoever hired that man to sneak into the temple and attack you. I opened my mouth and spoke. Daisy, whoever hired that man to sneak into the temple and attack you must have paid an enormous sum of money. Have you ever made an enemy out of an extremely wealthy person who openly wished you harm? Daisy replied, No, Your Holy Highness. I continued, Of course not. The person who should be apologizing is me, not you. He must have thought of killing my entourage and giving me revenge and a warning. There's no need for you to worry, however. I also have a good informant in the Thieves Guild, so I thought it might make things easier. One afternoon after a few days. A hunting festival. Rayhousty, who visited my room, nodded his head with a faint smile. We will send high-ranking priests in a letter of refusal. No matter how much it was an imperial request, a saintess had the qualifications and authority to refuse it. Since the inauguration, the temple has asked the imperial family for their understanding that the saint's body is so weak to the extent she can rarely participate in ceremonies. I pondered for a while. If I participate, do I hunt myself? There's no way. He shook his head. It is a priest's job to heal with divine power when a major figure is injured. I asked, is the imperial family the only one participating? He replied, most of the high-ranking central nobles will also participate. Hunting festival, he raised his eyebrows at my words and asked, are you interested? I told him, I overheard what the priests were saying. A story of nobles having doubts about the saints' passive behavior. It was a story that came out ahead of the hunting festival. Don't worry, they've always been noisy. The nobles simply like to make noise. Please don't pay them any mind. That's not what bothers me. It was only recently that the Empress sent an assassin to attack Daisy. For her to send an invitation like this so shamelessly, what in the world is she up to? If she wants to meet me that badly, I'll play along. Then Ariel opened her mouth and spoke, I will participate. Will you be okay? Rayhousty asked with an unwilling expression. The role of the temple in the hunting festival was limited, so there would be no danger, yet he seemed concerned. I replied, I don't care what other people do, but I think it would be good to think of it as an outing. I get tired of repeating my everyday routine. He replied, if so, I understand. I'll make sure we have enough paladins. As soon as he finished speaking, I continued. And now that I have become a saintess, I want to receive a business trip allowance. I saw Rayhousty wriggle his eyebrows at my words. Fortunately, it wasn't an unpleasant expression. I started out as a fake saintess, but now I have a real holy power. So, I'm thinking that my maintenance cost is more than 1,000 francs per month. Although the budget has been re-established, I would like to ask you to consider allocating an additional budget. Nevertheless, Please don't upset me with the allowance for participating in the imperial events from now on. For your information, I know how much money the temple receives every time a saintess goes to the imperial family. The imperial family paid 10,000 francs to the temple for every visit by a saintess. Still, don't you think I'll be motivated if you give me 30% of it? A deep smile formed on Rayhousty's lips at my words. And after a while he opened his mouth. All right, you'll be paid 3,000 francs per session. And from next month, we will pay you an additional 500 francs for the monthly maintenance cost. It was a surprisingly easy answer. I was a little excited at the thought that I could become rich in 4.5 years. You seem to have grown a little bit more greedy, but, Rayhousty's voice mixed with laughter continued to be heard. Still, I'm just glad you don't sound like you're going to leave anytime soon. He hadn't questioned me why I hid my power after it was revealed. But in the strangely softened attitude, I felt a clear pressure. Yes, I replied. If his previous gaze seemed like chains binding a person who had to leave. Now it feels like he's making an iron cage while humming. Just thinking about it made me feel like something was wrong. He continued, then I will express your intention to participate in the imperial palace. But, be careful, I replied, don't worry. I should write another congratulatory speech for the hunting festival. By the way, after a moment's thought, he spoke again. Do you have any other plans for the morning? I shook my head. No, not today. Then he smiled softly and said, I'm glad. I wanted to play chess with Ariel for a while. Chess, I repeated. He said, you like chess, Ariel, let's play. Then scene shifts. A few days later, the day of the hunting festival. I was in the carriage heading towards the hunting festival venue. The road of the city was too packed and crowded. Suddenly the chat window popped up. Seal, the deity of destruction, is bored to death. Hest, the deity of knowledge, prepares a thunderbolt for entertainment. I was furious and shouts, now are you children? I sigh that, still, I'm relieved I didn't end up wearing that weird choker. I had no idea Ariel and Ray has used to play chess. I don't even know the rules. If it weren't for Hest, that choker would be around my neck right now. When we were playing he lost because I had the power of knowledge. The loser would have to wear a choker necklace which was actually a tracking device. He asked me, how did you win? And I know a deal is a deal, but... He still had a questionable look as he hung the choker on himself in return for losing the bet. The god of art, Mond, rejoices. The god of benevolence, Oman, raises the corner of his mouth and fiddles with the lash handle. The god of destruction, Seal, blushes. I said, but what? Nothing. I won fair and square. As soon as you said your wish was to give me a present. I knew something was fishy. A choker that can track my every move and alerts you if I stray too far from a designated area. He replied, I designed it as a means to protect you while you're outside the temple. No, he designed a custom-made dog collar with GPS tracking. He asked, but how did you beat me? It's not like I went easy on you this time, I really was trying to win. You've never won unless I threw the game for you. I replied, if you're asking me for the secret to my victory. I only have 3 words for you. The Ghost Chess King, I said triumphantly, looking at the choker around his neck with satisfaction. God Hest is puffed up with pride. How long do I have to wear this? He asks. I turned my head slightly and smiled. Until I say stop. Then his golden eyes shook. He continued, it's like a master and slave. He frowned and turned his gaze to the other side. I saw his cheeks turn red again. Great. The last thing I needed was for Rayhez to discover a new fetish thanks to me. The god of art, Mond, is delighted with the awakening of Rayhousty's new taste. The god of benevolence, Oman, actively sells a lash to you. I tried to ignore the words of the gods and raised my head, pretending not to know. Even today is the day of the hunting festival. Rayhousty wore the choker and saw me off, yet when I told him it was okay to stop, he shook his head and said he wanted to keep wearing it. For someone who acted so shy at first, he sure doesn't seem eager to take it off. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. What is the Empress really after? The fact I've become hot gossip again is strange, as well. It's almost as though someone is fanning the flames. One thing is certain, I will never bend to the Empress's will. Still, I should probably prepare for a worst-case scenario. Then suddenly a knock on the carriage window. At one point, someone poked an apple in front of the carriage window. I flinched my shoulders in surprise and looked at him. Marquis Lloyd. I opened the window with him holding out it. I took it in bewilderment while staring at him. He usually dresses like a wealthy master. Today he looked like a perfect noble. Next to him was a fine brown horse with a mane. He said, "Eat it. Because it's an expensive apple that I bought for 10 francs from the girl selling apples." I asked, amazed. 10 francs, even if that whole apple basket is bought, it won't cost you 2 francs. I glanced at the sweet-looking apple, then looked at him again. A faint smile appeared on his lips and he spoke, "It's not expensive if I can live with the favor of the Saintess." I was a little embarrassed by that lovely smile and turned my gaze to the apple. What's this? In the original novel, Marquis Lloyd was a self-centered sociopath. It seems his character has changed quite a bit. I ask, "Are you going to the hunting festival too, Marquis?" "That's right," he replied. He got on his horse and followed the carriage slowly and asked, "It must be the Saints' first time." He seemed to know that Ariel hadn't attended most of the events so far. I continued, "Yes. It seems like a bigger event than I thought. Seeing the road slide like this. This doesn't happen every year. This year is special," he continued, as if he had read my questioning gaze. "It's said that since the Empress is pregnant, this year, the attention of the nobles is focused. The absolute power of the empire rested with the emperor. However, there were 2 opposing factions under the emperor, the imperial faction and the crown prince faction. Although many nobles supported Prince Kyle, the sword master and all-powerful prince, he didn't seem very interested in power struggles. Even if he renounced his position as crown prince, maybe it was because he was one of the top people in the continent just by the name of the sword master, and yet he had excellent political skills and was a natural-born warrior. On the other hand, the imperial faction, which was a political faction gathered around young Count Mikhail, was growing rapidly enough to be compared to the crown prince faction. As the Empress is pregnant this time, there is a great possibility that the minority of the imperial family would be on an equal footing with the mainstream, the crown prince faction. "If the baby in the Empress's womb is a boy?" he asked. "The high priest can't be seen today." "Ah, he's welcoming guests from abroad," I replied. He continued, "Can I escort you to the hunting festival? I'll even give you a tour of the hunting grounds." At his sudden words, I shook my head and declined. That figure suddenly overlapped with the figure leading me at the night market. "I'll be guided by Dwayne. And because I'm not in good shape, I'm not attracted to the hunting grounds." "I see. That's too bad." Cass's low voice whispered softly in my ear. "I thought it would be better for me to stay with you and protect you." I asked him back, the Marquis, towards me. I asked with a smile. Then, suddenly, his voice lowered and he spoke. "Even if you feel better, don't enter the hunting grounds. I'm telling you this because I have some ominous information. Thank you for your concern." A faint smile crept across Cass' lips as he looked at me the moment I stared straight at him. He saw I was eating apple without any worry. He got it that I am well aware of the fact that something might happen. He then smiled and said, "Seems like Saintess is already well aware. In that case, I suppose I'll have to wait for my chance to escort you some other time. The gridlock seems to be easing up a bit. I'll see you at the festival." And then, his horse, which ran faster than the carriage, gradually passed in front of me. After being greeted by the nobles, I sat down on a large chair a few meters away from the emperor. Several large tents were visible, and there were hundreds of horses and as many nobles as there were horses. And there were a lot more people in maid outfits that seemed to help them. When in the world is this woman going to make her move? I'm leery of the Empress's inaction. Summoning me to the festival like this immediately after the incident at the temple isn't just a coincidence. I know she's up to something. Prince turned his gaze on Ariel. Then he approached her and said, Saint Ariel, would you be so kind as to grant me the blessing of the deities? He put his hand up and grabbed my hand. The other day, Prince Kyle acted like he wanted to rip my throat out. Has he had a change of heart? I was giving him blessings. Then, immediately, the chat window in front of me flashed. The god of destruction, Seal, blesses you. A tiger's energy sprang up all over my body. Why are you blessing me all of a sudden, leaving the male lead behind? Even Seal was the god who blessed Kyle's birth month. A voice came. It was Prince. Your mind has been wandering all day. And now you can't even give a proper blessing. If it makes you this anxious, you shouldn't have come. Your Holiness, you're a mess. I thought, is he worried about me? Then Prince, you wouldn't by any chance be using this as an opportunity to hold my hand, would you? I startled and told him this wasn't a case. The Emperor who was sitting just behind them saw both of them joking with each other. He passed the comment, Prince seems to be quite fond of the saint. I would love to see them married so that he can fulfill his duty as the successor. But for the life of me, I can't figure out if the saint even. Then the Empress. The saint always hides herself away at the temple, claiming to have health issues. She must have had a reason for accepting today's invitation. Why don't we try giving them a little privacy? I have a perfect idea. At that time, the Emperor's voice was heard. How about the saintess participating directly in the hunting festival with the crown prince? Turning my head, I saw the Empress, who had whispered something in the Emperor's ear, grinned and straightened her body. Kyle spoke to the Emperor instead of me. It's dangerous for her to go barefoot in a forest with monsters. Then the Emperor responded to his words. Can't you, the sword master, protect her? Well, then maybe you can get closer, Perhaps, the Empress used this as an excuse to trick the Emperor. Prince Lee continued, but we don't know what kind of unexpected situation will happen. Then the Empress cut off the Prince Kaylee words and spoke. Last year, the High Priest came as a representative of the temple, and he personally took the lead in purifying the forest. He infused divine power into the rocks of Else Valley. And these days, I heard that Else Valley is infested with monsters again. In addition to subjugating monsters at the hunting festival, if the Saintess goes to Else Valley and purifies Kinston through its rocks, there will be a lot less accidents this year. There is a reason why the Saintesses in the past have been carrying out purification activities every few years. It was a logical story. As if it has been prepared in advance. The Empress is right, but the Saint's choice is up to her. At the Emperor's last words, all the nobles' eyes turned to me. It was expected that they would push me to the hunting ground by any means they could anyway. I get up from my seat and answer. Absolutely, Your Majesty, but it doesn't seem like it would be fun to ride a carriage to the hunting grounds. I'm going to ride that horse. At my words, and the corner of the Empress' lips, which had risen, hardened. Sir Alberto doesn't seem to be a good horse rider, so he'll ride in my carriage. Given what happened at the square, he doesn't appear to be a very skilled horseman after all. Alberto rolled his eyes and protested to me. What do you mean I can't ride a horse? I got up from my seat with a calm expression and walked out, standing in front of the Emperor. Your Imperial Majesty, less than a month ago, I saw Sir Alberto trampling on a child with a horse in the square. The child almost died. At those words, the Empress's expression hardened, and he was also startled. I turned to Alberto and asked him. Hitting him, trampling on him, and running without looking back as if he was like a dwarf hanging from an angry bull. He clenched his fists till his face turned white. He said. Do you have any proof that I did? I replied. I treated that child with my divine power, that's why there are many eyewitnesses. You still can't remember, so I guess you didn't even know you had trampled on a child. The emperor looked at Alberto and furrowed his eyebrows. Is that true? He replied. Your Imperial Majesty. That's. Alberto's eyes lost their way and were shaking. After a while, the emperor clicked his tongue. Huh, I know that you're weak in swordsmanship, but your horse riding skills are serious. So, for each other's safety, it would be better for Sir Alberto to be in my carriage. I ride on Sir Alberto's horse. You can't. The Empress's eyes were trembling with an anxious light. I felt like I was about to burst out laughing inside her transparent look. I continued, if he goes to the hunting festival on horseback with skills he doesn't even know that he trampled on a child, isn't it rude to the imperial family and nobles who are participating in the hunting festival today? The emperor looked at Alberto and ordered. Let him ride in the carriage. And the saintess. The emperor's gaze turned to me. He asked, you're wearing a dress, would it be okay? I pondered for a moment and then said to the emperor. I think it would be uncomfortable. Can I borrow your clothes? After a while, Alberto was in the temple carriage instead of Ariel in Ariel dress. A noise was heard breaking the moment. These damn jerks. Can't you go slowly? The temple carriage was strong, but it wasn't a combat one, that's why it wasn't good for shock absorption. This means that the feeling of a rocky surface or an uneven surface is conveyed inside. A voice filled with anger was heard again. How dare she humiliate me like this? Wench always gets in my way. Next time I see her, she's dead meat. Alberto was grinding his teeth. Can you not hear me? I said stop. Then the carriage stopped in the middle of the forest. Alberto was cursing on coachman. The moment he stepped outside the carriage. At that moment, the flying arrow shattered the glass of the carriage and narrowly pierced the other wall. Alberto's eyes were wide open. The reason for having the saintess participate in the hunting festival was to harm her. A harsh, hoarse voice was heard from above. You're unlucky to meet bandits. With his head raised, Alberto looked at them with wide open eyes. About 5 ugly men in commoners' clothes were covering their mouths. However, they weren't bandits. They're all assassins hired by Alberto. Nice to meet you, saintess. Alberto got into the carriage of the saintess, wearing her clothes, and was mistaken for her. The sound of a sword being pulled out made his spine tremble. One of the bandits said, don't be too resentful. Still, you're the saintess, so even if you die, God will send you to a better place. Alberto shouts, I'm not the saintess. The saintess went there. Alberto was bewildered by this situation and protested while staring intently at them. However, he bit his tongue so hard that blood was oozing from his mouth, and his pronunciation wasn't right. Alberto kept shouting, I'm not da saintess, you bastards. Then, the man holding the knife stopped and furrowed his eyebrows, and the voices of men talking were heard. There are rumors that the saintess is an idiot, it seems to be true. I heard she was pretty, yet in reality she has a terrible face. I've never seen a face so messed up. Alberto was just going crazy. He shouts, Crazy bastards, what is wrong with my fesh? Crazy bastards, what's wrong with my face? One bandit spoke. Well, we still have a job to do. No hard feelings, eh? Since you're the saint, the gods will send you to a good place. Our story ends here, my friends. Once again, Happy New Year. Comment and share, this will help us.